All right, Noolee, welcome to the Men Made for More podcast. I'm so stoked we were able to coordinate this and really happy to have you on here, man.
Thanks for having me, Dave. Excited for this.
Yeah, it'll be good. So let's, for those that are listening that don't know you as well, why don't you kick things off with your story, both personally and professionally, and where you're at, what you're up to.
Yeah, my name is Noolee Kim. I reside in the South Bay area of the greater LA area, which is more by the beach, like Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach area. We live in that area. We practice in that area. By we, I mean my wife of 10 years, and then my two boys, Elliot, who's 5, and Dylan, who's 3, soon to be 21, both of them, seems like.
Goes quick.
Yeah, it does. Personally, I went to I'm a greater LA Southern California kid. I born and raised in this area. Lived kind of everywhere, moved everywhere in the LA area. I am a diehard Lakers and Dodgers fan and Rams fan, and we try to instill that in our home, both my wife and I, and then also into our kids, brainwashing them. I went to the University of California, Irvine for undergrad, and then went to Mount St. Mary's College, now university, for physical therapy school. And then after graduating, I went into a 1-year-long orthopedic residency program with a medical group called Healthcare Partners. Now they're called Optum, and Kaiser Permanente. And the year-long residency program pretty much consisted of mentorship with some of the top expert clinicians, literally in our profession. Throughout the year, was a part of some research, served in some, doing some medical care to some pro bono clinics, and really honed my skills as a clinician, as a provider during that year. And then finished that, took a board certification in orthopedics afterwards, which is just a long test to confirm that you learned something. And then for the majority of my career so far, practicing 8 years, I worked for a managed care setting, or worked in a managed care setting, worked with Healthcare Partners for a little bit, and then with Kaiser Permanente. And for those of you that don't know, managed care is what you would find as a HMO insurance. And so I worked for an HMO group for a long time. And during that time, I have had the fortunes of seeing a lot of patients. I saw about 4 to 5 new patients every day for the life of probably 7 to 8 years.
Wow.
And yeah, just to give you a comparison, Dave, someone will see 3 to 4 new evals potentially a week. I was seeing about 4 to 5 new evals a day, which was challenging, but really grew me in terms of my clinical practice and care. And so in addition to that, I worked alongside a lot of great providers with a lot of different letters behind their names. And it was really helpful in getting me to where I am today.
And what, talk about the transition then. So what was the transition point from that setting of seeing so many people to the setting you're in now?
Yeah, there was a plethora of reasons. I think number one is I wanted to spend more time with my patients. And so in a managed care setting, typically you'll go in and get a 30-minute, 45-minute evaluation, which is the first visit. And then because it's a bit impacted, what ends up happening is you get your follow-up visit with your provider ends up getting pushed out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe even a month. And so for me, that over time, I had some challenges walking with patients through their entire course of care, meaning when you walk in with pain to when you exit without pain and into performance. So I never saw that end because people would drop off because of that. And then in addition to that, the time that I spent with patients per visit was pretty limited and impacted as well. And so that initially drove me. I've always aspired to own my own business one day, set my own culture, set my own cadence, be the ruler of the land per se. And yeah, it just kind of, everything kind of came to a head, and decided, man, this is probably our time to move on.
Yeah, I think it's so cool you made the jump, and just looking at, talking to you about your treatment style, and seeing your site, and knowing the people that you've been able to help, is there's such this focus on long-term results, and lasting things for life. And I think so many people try and chase these quick fixes, these magic bullets, these healthy hacks. People are after this, like, I want it done and I want it done now. And unfortunately, that's not the way it works with our body. That's not the way it works with a lot of things in our life. But I love your philosophy so much, because the clients you work with is really centered on, okay, we're gonna get you out of pain. We can do that, but we also need to get you back into performance. We need to get you back into doing whatever that is that they want to do with their life. And I just want to hear a little, and make our focus shift into a little more on your perspective of, in your experience, why do these quick fixes not work, and what is the key to reaching these long-term sustainable results that you get with so many of your clients?
Yeah, let me be the first to confess that I look for quick fixes as well in my life.
Same.
Yeah, let me just be the first one to confess there. And I think you hit it on the head, Dave. Anything in life, I think, anything in life that you're trying to change, most things in life, at least, if you're trying to change things, there's no quick fix. I think we can all confess to that, right? Um, Personal growth, diet, habits. These are things that don't change overnight. Weight loss doesn't change overnight. These are things that have to happen, over a long period. You have to have it repeatable. And Tiger Woods, probably my favorite athlete at this moment. I'm a big golf fan. He said this. He says he said this a couple times in the last couple of years, in his interviews. He said consistency over a long stretch or a period of time is what really stands out. And I firmly believe in that. I often tell people and give, if you give me enough time, and if you're consistent enough with me, we're going to figure out your pain point. We're not only going to figure out your pain point, we're going to resolve your pain now, and then resolve it for good. And oftentimes when people come in with pain, more often than not in the physical therapy world, the pain, more often than not, is but a mere symptom. And what I mean by that, is the pain might present somewhere in your body, for example, the shoulder or the neck or the lower back or the knee. But more often than not, the issue that's driving that pain is oftentimes coming from elsewhere. And so I give the analogy all the time. Well, then where did this pain come from? Why am I having this shoulder pain that onset so randomly, or this lower back pain? I really didn't do anything. I just got out of bed, and I started to walk and have this pain, or I bent down and picked up something. And then later that day, I began having this lower back pain. And I liken it to the analogy of, if you plant a seed about a foot into the ground of soil, you may not see the plant grow or start to grow, but eventually, if you perpetuate your issue or the underlying issue, the pain's it's going to sprout. So just because you don't see the issue doesn't necessarily mean that, the plant's not growing, assuming that you're watering it and all those things. And so, yeah, I think going back to the question, the quick fixes don't work, because in order to see change that's been underlying for a long period of time, you really need to address the root cause, which takes time, consistency over a long period of time.
Yeah, so well said. I love that. Analogy too with the plant. And you and I both see it. You mentioned shoulder pain. You mentioned low back pain. These are things that people, just had someone I was working with today that thinks it's like, well, I just did this one thing and that was what messed up my back. And it's like, no, there was thousands of repetitions of this building up over time that led to that. And if we stay on the low back example, what are some of the things you tend to see in terms of, let's talk, so low back pain, as you said, being, and I agree with, being a symptom, that's just what they're feeling. What are some common, more root causes that you might find from an assessment in a low back pain example?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, so the low back is the great abyss. And it's a common area of pain that, one, it's common. But then two, it can be this kind of mysterious kind of area of your body, right? Like where um, 10 different providers can be telling you 10 different things in regards to your lower back. It's like, oh, it can be this, it's your muscle, it's your joint, it's your ligament, it's your bones, it's your discs, right? It's sciatica. And not to get into the weeds of it all, but oftentimes, going back to what I was talking about, the underlying issue, the pain might present actually in the lower back, but the issue that solves that pain typically is elsewhere. So for example, if you're having lower back pain in the middle of your spine or out to the side of your spine in the muscular area, it can be the issue, although the pain might be presenting in your back, the issue might be coming from the hips or coming from the abdominals, which is in the front part of your the stomach region, or even your upper back, or even down to the big toe, which I've had a couple times where just by simply addressing the flexibility and the mobility in the big toe and teaching how to move correctly, that back pain actually resolved. And so for those of you that are listening, I think, if you're going to a provider and they're just merely addressing your lower back and not looking elsewhere and assessing elsewhere, make sure to ask. I would say, hey, can you take a look at some other parts of my body that may be contributing to my lower back pain? Those things might be an issue driving lower back pain.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to, be aware of that. At least you don't have to know what the problem is, but you have to be able to be proactive in seeking out. If someone's just looking at your lower back, you got to say like you said, hey, can you check these other areas? Can we see if anything else might be going on? Find someone who is willing to do that, and knowledgeable enough to do that, because it's hard on ourselves to see what the root cause is, because we're so fixated on, you're like, my back hurts, all I want is my back pain to get better. But it's like, okay, we want to take care of that, but we also want to get to the underlying cause of this. And I think that brings me into another question I want to hear from you is, like, how do you balance the short-term fixes, the short-term wins? So I think those are important with more of the long-term approach. So how do you have that? Okay, yes, let's give you some short-term successes. Let's give you some small wins, but let's also keep our eyes on the bigger picture.
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I'm finding in practice is that every time the patient comes in, my goal in their time with me for that day is to try to have the pain that they're walking in with feel incrementally better. And for me, during that time, I want them to feel it. I want them to experience it. I want them to put in the effort and actually see short-term results right away. And typically they do. The patients that come, and especially with lower back pain, when you have someone move correctly, they say they walk in with pain and they're like, man, my back hurts. What I'm finding is that if you have them move correctly and you have them activate the right muscles and cue them correctly and they move properly, at the end of their time, they're like, man, I feel better. I feel better. And interestingly enough, what ends up happening is that over the course of time, as you continue to encourage this and say, look, your body can feel better if you move correctly and you activate properly and do all these things. Yeah, you're going to see these incremental changes, these short wins. Now, man, as you continue to do it, man, this is just gonna grow exponentially. You're gonna feel so much better. And then you tie that in with goals and function and life. I had a client in here the other day, or earlier this morning, and I was like, man, we did two things. We literally did two exercises for an hour's time. And she got up after being on the floor and sweating her butt off. And then she got up and she was like, man, things feel like they opened up. My lower back feels like it opened up. And from there, I was just like, she understood it. And for me, I'm like, man, this short term gain that you're gonna feel now and for a little while longer, as you continue to take ownership of what we just went through and continue to build out this program for you, it's going to translate into you going back to being able to pick up your grandkids again, get on the floor with them again, roll with them again, throw them up in the air again. And I genuinely try to tie one. Going back to the question, I try to alleviate their pain right away, and then always re-solidify by saying, "Man, continue. You can do it. Persevere. Endure. Keep going, because you're gonna feel better forever."
So well said. I love that too. And it's there's when we're on the right path, it's in, I've had past episodes on the whole no pain, no gain thing, or having to like grit through pain is not how it should be either. You can get short-term wins if you're on the right path and you're addressing the right things. You should feel better. And that should be pain related. That should be for those just into fitness, trying to work out. It's like, you shouldn't leave every workout feeling miserable. If you're working out in the right way from a sustainability standpoint, you should leave feeling like more energy and not just like crashed on the ground. But I think continuing to remind people of why they're doing it. Like you said, I love that you tie it back to lifting their kids, or, being able to throw their grandkids around, play with them. I think that really helps people from a mindset standpoint. I think it's so easy to lose sight of, though, I'm not sure if you see this, but do you see in the day to day, the week to week, people get this initial win and then it's like they start to lose sight of how far they come? Do you run into that with some of your clients too?
I do, and what's afforded me, what I really enjoy about being in business for myself, um, is that I have their personal information, and I can text them with my cell phone, and I can shoot them a video, I can shoot them a call, and I can check in on them, keep them accountable, and um, there's something to that, man. There's something to, in the middle of the week, and this goes for me too, and you have a big win, and then all of a sudden, things tail off for 5 6 days, maybe even a week, or even a couple days, and you slip right back into prior to that win, what like, I can't get out of this hole, my pain's still there. But then getting a call, or having someone allowing for the client to, or even myself, feeling like someone's in my corner, someone's encouraging me, motivating me, keeping me accountable, man, it just continues to push that forward. And so, yeah, I'm finding that that's something that I enjoy doing. And then also two, that it keeps people kind of motivated and on track with care.
Yeah, I think we're made for encouragement. We're made to encourage one another. I think that's such a big piece. And I love what you said too about being able to access them and give that encouragement. Cause I think people lose sight of the big picture, and they also lose sight of how far they've come too. I have someone, he was in this morning and had terrible MRI. I told him I didn't even want to see it cause it didn't matter for what we were doing. But he's like, this is the word they tell me I can't ever like round my back again. I can't ever do this. I can't. And he comes in just with all these like, the no seat, like people just have told him all the things he can't do. And he comes in day one, he's like, all I want to do is like be able to, sit down on the toilet and not have pain. It was like, or sit down in a chair and not have pain, and like very basic level human stuff. And then within the next one visit later, he's like crushing it, moving around, and we're 6 visits in now, and he's back to working out. And he's like, man, but I can't do a flip when I'm surfing, body surfing now. And it's like, dude, do you remember day one when he said you just want to be able to sit down without pain? And it's so easy for us to forget that. And I think that's, I mean, why do you think that is, that we lose sight of those wins so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, it's going back to, I think, we've gone to, I mean, society, this is a whole different discussion, right? We've gone to a society where it's long term, a long game perspective is not in the picture anymore. You have 2 day shipping with Amazon, and then you have fast food chains, and you have access to communication via a touch of your phone, right? And so, the long-term perspective of, man, I'm in this for the long haul, has completely gone. And so if something doesn't happen right away, if the next thing doesn't come on and the next thing isn't addressed right away, yeah, I think yeah, or you never appreciate where you've come from. And so, and this goes back to, I mean, even and this is just for me personally, I tend to forget. And so if I don't pause to remember, even, let alone 3 months ago, if I don't pause to remember where I was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 days ago, man, my heart, even for me, I feel like there's no measure of gratitude and joy and even satisfaction. It's always grumbling. It's always, what's the next thing? It's always, how come not this? How come not that? And so, yeah, I think it's a societal issue, to be honest with you, more than it is anything else. So,
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's something I fall into. Even like from the morning to the, to the evening, it can happen. It can happen so quick. And there's one of the pastors at our church. He always talks about, he calls it like the when then principle of, it's like, well, when I get that, then I'll be happy. And I fall into that all the time. It's like, well, when we get to this level in business, when we can help this many people, when my level of fitness is this, when like once we can get in a position where we can have a little more time freedom, not be working all the time, it's like then we'll be happy. Then we'll be able to work on these things that it's like, these are things we got to be addressing all the time.
100%. Couldn't agree with you more, man. Couldn't
But
agree with you more.
that gratitude is a hard skill to, it takes some intentionality to practice that regularly. It's not something I don't think that comes too natural to us.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. And I want to hear a little more about your perspective on, it's right in your name, i.Athlete Physio. I'm sure many people don't classify themselves as athletes when they come in to see you necessarily. Think they're just average, the active adult looking at, like you said, the grandparent, the dad or mom trying to get out of pain. They might not see themselves as athlete, but I think you would probably beg to differ. And why do you think adults or anyone coming to see you should see themselves as an athlete and address their body that way?
Yeah. So I think the common perception of an athlete is someone that we watch on TV, that moves, that gets paid for playing a sport, right? For me, the way I define an athlete is someone who's proficient or skilled or active in sport, in physical activity or exercise. And so for me, if you're moving, if your body is moving to do something, whether it's competing in a 100-meter track and field event, or if it's bending down to tie your shoes or getting up off a toilet, for me, I define that as someone who's an athlete. And so because I would figure most people, if not all of us, fall under that umbrella. Um, for me, I define your body as an athlete. Again, the skill might be a little bit different, and the movement coordination might be a little different, and we might look a little bit different. But your body is geared to move to take care of whatever you're participating in. And so, because of that, the load is different. I define it as load, or the physical activity might be a little bit different, but your body needs to be specifically equipped to take care of whatever your body is asking you to do athletically or as an athlete. Um, and so, yeah, for my perspective, and when clients come in, I assess everyone as an athlete, and then go from there as far as treating pain and moving a client towards their goals.
Yeah, I really like the way you phrase that too, with maybe load being different, the intensity of the activity might be different, but everyone should try and maintain their body with that same intensity. We look at the athletes, at least the top level athletes, the good athletes out there,
Yeah.
the ones that are invested in their sport and in their skill. They're keeping their body in shape all year round. They're not just waiting for something to break down. They're being proactive with it. And what are some of the other tools maybe from a mental standpoint that you teach people when it comes to maintaining improvements for the long haul, being ready at all times, being ready for whatever their sports season might be, if that's playing with their kids or playing recreational sport or anything like that? What tools do you give them to maintain those improvements?
Yeah, I initially I think the front end of the plan or the program is very important. And so for me, I really just try to establish good, simple, achievable habits. And it might be something as simple as, over the next week, I want you to just walk 10 minutes. And I try to make it as practical and as simple and as achievable as possible. And I'll literally grab their phone. I'll say, I want you to set an alarm. I want to see it. Put it in your calendar. Okay, good, perfect. An alarm is set. Every time the alarm goes off, here's a time during the week where you're going to walk, and you're going to walk. You don't have to walk fast, just walk. Set the timer, go for a 10-minute walk, and then that's it for the day as far as physical activity. And so from there, it's one, pushing, like I was mentioning earlier, pushing a lot of accountability, but continuing to build and carry over on their habits that I'm helping them to develop early on. And so and that just falls into a mentality standpoint. I think even from a mental standpoint, it's like, yeah, I there is something that I'm doing regularly physically, and something that I can build upon that is achievable, simple, and that I can continue to do in within my context and environment. And so it really, it's really setting a good foundation from the very beginning. I find is really helpful from a mental standpoint.
I love it. And I want to hear your personal journey side of things too. I didn't know you lost 50 pounds. I saw it on your site, and we hadn't talked about this, but man, you look great for one. But how, what kind of things did you learn through that journey, and how did how did you grow, like physically, mentally? What did you have to adapt to get from that version of yourself to where you're at today?
Yeah. So thanks, Dave, for that. Those kind of words. Yeah, so back in 2011, 2010, that's when I got married. And I was in PT school. So we got married in the first year of PT school, which was a journey and a battle in and of itself. We got married and then ended up going to Korea, where my mom is from, to visit relatives who weren't able to make our wedding. And so I went back, and I hadn't seen relatives in 20, 25 plus years, 20 years. And then what they told me when I visited them, a majority of them, they said, "Oh, you turned out the way we thought you would turn out." And what they meant by that was the way I looked physically. I was overweight. I was physically not as active as I should be. And from a health standpoint, I wasn't in the best place. And they were right, right? It's harsh reality, but and it was harsh, but it was reality nonetheless. And so for me, as I got back, my personality is, I got a little bit pissed off, not at them, but just I just got angry inside. And then typically anger starts moving me towards a particular goal. And so I just started. I didn't have a plan. I just said, I'm going to run, and I'm going to eat. I'm going to try to eat the same meal the entire day for 6 months. So I literally, for 6 months, I ate the same meal. Um, and then I ran, and I ran, and I ran, and I ran, and I probably built up to like 25 miles, 30 miles a week running, which I hate running. Let me just confess that I hate running. But I got up to that point, and then I just shed weight. But then it wasn't the way that I should have shed. I shed weight nonetheless. And so I went from about 240 to about 190. And I'm at about 195, 200, depending on the day, the time of day now. But yeah, it was a mental hurdle. Probably the one single hardest thing I've ever done in my life. From a mental standpoint, from a rhythm habit standpoint, and from a psychological standpoint. I love food. I love beer. And so, I mean, the battle to withstand and to push up against that stuff was, especially during like PT school when it's stressful and times are tough. Yeah. And so yeah, and I've kept it off. I've kept the majority of it off since, and it's still a battle to this day.
Was your deeper why for why was that so important? Was it what I know the trigger was seeing your relatives, but that alone, trying to prove people wrong, won't necessarily sustain you through those hard days. What were you connecting that to?
Yeah. Yeah. I was always the fat kid growing up. I was always the fat kid growing up, and the big guy. I was the guy underneath the basket, asked to grab rebounds. I was always last in the jogging line on our basketball team. I was always the lineman, and so even from kids could be mean and cruel, and so even from childhood, that always struck me. But nothing in my childhood and growing up put a spark under my butt hot enough. Well, I guess that's what the yeah, that's what did it. It was all that stuff built up, and then when we went to Korea, that's what kind of led to me pushing towards achieving a goal. So that was a greater why. I didn't want to. Yeah, I had enough.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you have to adopt different mindsets and different habits though that you didn't have previously, probably for how many years of you're changing, trying to adopt the habits of
For
what
sure.
works at the expense of, and sometimes we find ourselves in the same ruts and we can, first we can point fingers at different things and genetics, we can point fingers at situations and environments, but eventually it's and I always hate this because when I reflect on the things I struggle with, it comes back to person in the mirror. It comes back to my habits, what I'm doing or what I'm not doing that's keeping us from doing that. And that's sometimes you can only take so much before it's time to make a change. It's cool to see you did that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to transition to the last part of our show here. I know you're short on time here. I just want to make sure to respect that. But I hope I didn't. You're going to have to think of a new one if this was going to be the one you were going to use, because the question I ask everyone and talk about how from the outside it's so easy to, especially when I approach you about this podcast, of being a place where us as men can be vulnerable and report the struggles that happen. And I love your weight loss example is already an awesome version of that. But it's easy for people to see you from the outside now and say, hey, you got it all together. You got great family. You got successful business. If people aren't following you on Instagram, you're crushing it on Instagram and putting out great content. From the outside, it's so easy to look like, hey, everything's all together. He's got this life that's all running the way it should, and that can be discouraging or even harmful, I think, for other men to see when other men are looking at on the outside. The comparison trap is definitely real and something I fall into, and I'm sure you do, and I'm sure we both be the first to admit that it's been anything but easy and anything but a smooth road the whole time. So I wanted to hear if you don't mind being vulnerable with listeners of what's a challenge you faced or currently facing or faced in the past that's actually been a real catalyst for your growth as a man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with this, yeah, this can be a conversation over many hours. So yeah, let me just be the first, alongside what you were saying, Dave, to confess that I don't have it all together. Not from a business standpoint, not from a husband standpoint, not from a father standpoint. Um, and, even my involvement with church, not as an elder, I don't have it all together, and it's not false humility. Yeah, I genuinely confess that I don't have it all together. And so, yes, all the things that you're seeing is not the full picture. And so, yeah, it certainly has been a journey for me on the personal side, outside of the professional side. And so a lot of what happened to me personally and growing up and things like that really impacted the way I function, both good and bad. And yeah, the current struggle is battling that. So my roles, for me, my values are one, my faith, two, my wife and my kids, and three, my church family, and then business. And it kind of comes in that order. Not kind of, it does come in that order. And so because of my inabilities as a business owner, as a husband, as a wife, as a father, and even as a role in my serving at church. Um, yeah, I'm finding that time is lacking, and my efforts are lacking, my energy is lacking, and so my human tendency is to try to put barriers and to put structure and to put schedule in such a tidy way where I can start to do better in these gaps and facets. And as you know, Dave, you fall short. So no matter what you try to do, you try to puzzle piece together, you get up at 4:30, you grind, you create a schedule, block schedule, Eves, right? And you do all these things and you realize, man, I still fall short in these areas. And so, yeah, there's honestly, for me, the solution is my faith. And I just turn to my prayers in the morning have been the same. I've been telling some of our church guys, I just pray the exact same things in the morning. I say, God, I surrender to you what I can't control, and what I can't give up, you take it from me, and then allow for my status or my feelings of adequacy, not in, how much money we make or how better a patient feels, but in, what you have to provide. And so there are days where, we do well from a business standpoint. And I have to remind myself, like, my status isn't found in how well I do in business. And then there are days when we tank. And then I have to remind myself my identity isn't found in, um, you know, success or a lack of it, that kind of thing. And so, certainly, and there's many more things attached to that as well. So,
Man, I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate you being vulnerable about that, because that's so much good stuff. And like you said, I think we could talk for a whole hour on this topic alone, because there's so many, layers to that, and having those priorities, but time doesn't always match up. Our performance definitely doesn't always match up in terms of what that looks like. And I just think it's great that you can share that, because I know you're not the only one struggling with it. There's at least two people in this conversation struggling with that. So I'm sure there's many more outside of it. So really appreciate you sharing this. And I want to kind of wrap things up here with a few takeaways first from things that I was writing down as we were talking about, just to give people some actionable steps from some of the things we were talking about earlier. There's no quick fix in anything that's meaningful. Change doesn't occur overnight, and getting better, getting to that long-term goal won't happen overnight either. I love talking about the whole thing of gratitude and appreciating where you came from, keeping the long-term goal in mind, being grateful for all the progress that we have made in those certain areas. And last thing around habits, I love when you said simple, practical, and achievable. So set habits that are achievable, that they're simple. They don't have to be. You don't have to make this this grand goal that you have to will yourself to. A lot of times, the small changes create big things over time. So anything you want to add to those takeaways? There were a bunch of things, but those were a few things that I jotted down.
no, I mean, you hit it in the head. Yeah, you hit it in the head. That was good.
Very cool. So last hypothetical question here, ask all the guests it. We're saying you're leaving your favorite coffee shop, your favorite restaurant, your favorite brewery in town, and you bump into your younger self 10 years back. So younger Noolee asks current you for some life advice. You're on your way to a super important day with full schedule of patients you can't miss. You only have 60 seconds to talk with him. What advice would you give him? What would you say to him?
Number one, the Lakers and the Dodgers will have their low. Have some stick-to-itiveness with them. Be loyal, be faithful. Number one. Number two, relationships are king. Relationships are king. Value them, treasure them. There will be ups and downs in your relationships with all the people that you come across in your life. Have some stick-to-itiveness. I'm reminded of 1 Corinthians 13, that love is patient, love is kind. And so, yes, those two things. Make sure that the Lakers and the Dodgers will have some highs and lows, battle through the lows. And then secondly, relationships are king.
Love it, man. This was so great. I know we were kind of short on time here today, but so much good stuff packed into this. Really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, sharing that experience, and being encouragement for anyone listening. So let's just wrap up here. Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you? Those definitely in the LA area, or anyone else looking to get a hold of you.
Yeah, our practice is called i.Athlete Physio. And our website is i.athletephysio.com. So you can find us, check us out on our website. You can follow us on Instagram, i.athletephysio, PHYSIO, i.athletephysio, PHYSIO. We also are on Facebook as well. You can find us on i.Athlete, i.Athlete Physio on Facebook as well. Yeah, that's where you can find us.
Very cool. Take advantage of that. Reach out to them, especially those in the LA area. I knew you, man. I had an absolute blast. I appreciate you taking some time and getting on here, and really appreciate you sharing all that.
No, man, thanks for having me, Dave. Appreciate it.